What the cameras didn't show. The night that almost broke Pacquiao.
He's not putting himself in the position. Pacquiao looking really strong in this.
December 8th, 2012. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas.
Arena, Venetian, Macau, China.
Rios has been unable.
1 second left in the sixth round. And Manny Pacquiao, the man who had conquered 8 weight divisions, the man whom the entire nation of the Philippines stayed up until 3 in the morning to watch, was lying face first on the canvas, not moving. His wife Jinky was at ringside. She turned hysterical. She had to be physically restrained from climbing into the ring. His trainer, Freddie Roach, a man who has seen everything boxing has to offer, would later say his girlfriend, who is a doctor, thought he was dead. The referee, Kenny Bayless, never even started a count. What you saw that night, what was broadcast to millions, was the physical event, the punch, the fall, the aftermath. But what the camera didn't show was everything that led to that moment. And what came after it shattered far more than a record. To understand why December 8th, 2012 hit so differently, you have to understand what Manny Pacquiao had become by the time he walked into that ring. This was not just a boxer. This was a man born into extreme poverty in General Santos City in the Philippines. A man who left home at age 14, weighing just 98 pounds, and slept in the streets of Manila. A man who began boxing at a local gym partly because it came with meals. From those streets, he built something that no fighter in the history of the sport had ever built: world championships in 8 separate weight divisions, from 112-pound flyweight all the way to 154-pound super welterweight. A weight range of 42 pounds conquered by a single human being. By 2012, he had destroyed Oscar De La Hoya. He had knocked out Ricky Hatton in 2 rounds. He had beaten Miguel Cotto, Antonio Margarito, Shane Mosley, and Timothy Bradley. He was, by almost every measure, the greatest pound-for-pound fighter alive. And yet, for 4 fights stretching across 8 years, there was one man he could never fully put away: Juan Manuel Marquez. Their rivalry had been called one of the greatest in the sport. 3 previous fights, 3 controversial decisions. Marquez had never beaten Pacquiao on the scorecards, but many ringside observers believed he had earned at least one of those victories. By December 2012, Marquez had made a specific and deliberate decision. He hired a strength and conditioning specialist. He bulked up. He had studied Pacquiao for nearly a decade. He had one plan. And before the fight, he said it plainly: "I knew Manny could knock me out at any time, but I also knew I could knock him out." That is the fight the cameras covered. But there is a second story, running parallel, hidden in plain sight, that almost no one was talking about at the time. In the months leading into the Marquez 4 fight, observers and journalists had already raised a public question. Was Manny Pacquiao fully focused? It was a legitimate question. Because by late 2012, Manny Pacquiao was not only one of the most famous athletes on the planet, he was a sitting congressman in the Philippines. He was balancing a training camp in California with congressional duties, public appearances, television commitments, and the pressure of being a living national symbol for 97 million people. Bleacher Report raised the distraction question openly before the fight, noting that Pacquiao's camp had already been discussing the next fight, scheduled around the Philippine elections, before the Marquez fight had even taken place. But the real distraction wasn't political. It was personal. ESPN reported, based on sources close to the camp, that in the final week before the fight, Manny Pacquiao's marriage was in crisis. His relationship with Jinky had deteriorated to the point where she was reportedly on the verge of filing for divorce. On the night of the fight itself, she initially refused to accompany him to the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Pacquiao, the man the whole world was waiting on, reportedly refused to leave the hotel suite without her. By the time she finally agreed to go, Pacquiao arrived at his dressing room with less than 15 minutes to warm up with Freddie Roach before walking to the ring. 15 minutes for one of the most significant fights of his career. Freddie Roach later confirmed exactly what had happened. His words: "We had a great training camp going into that fight, but on the last week everything fell apart. The personal problems affected the fight, and I don't think Manny will let that happen again. All of the distractions around him caused him to fight poorly. And Pacquiao himself, when the time came to speak, said this: "The fight was not that hard for me, but I was having some family problems. I was in 100% physical condition for that fight against Marquez, but I did have some family issues that I had to deal with. I also underestimated him. Here is what the cameras did capture, and why it still stops people cold. Through the first 5 rounds, Manny Pacquiao was ahead on all 3 judges' scorecards, 47 to 46. He was doing what he had done to Marquez 3 times before, moving, pressuring, landing combinations. In the 6th round, he dropped Marquez. He was moving in for the finish, and then, with 1 second left in the round, Pacquiao threw a left hand that missed. The momentum of the punch sent him lurching forward. Marquez, who had been waiting for exactly this opening for 8 years, threw a short right counter. A 2-inch punch. It landed on Pacquiao's chin. And Manny Pacquiao, the pound-for-pound king of the world, went face first into the canvas and did not move. Roach described it in the post-fight press conference. He never saw it coming. If you watch the replay, it's about a 2-inch punch. Manny got caught swinging a little bit wild. We got caught. It was a great knockout. Marquez stepped back, looked at the canvas, then turned to his corner and leapt into their arms. Referee Kenny Bayless saw no need to count. And in the front row, Jinky Pacquiao, who had very nearly not been there at all, broke into tears. For 2 minutes, the man who had never been stopped since 1999 lay still on the canvas. When he finally came around, Pacquiao was helped to his corner. He sat on his stool. He blew his nose. And he stared, according to multiple ringside reporters present that night, vacantly ahead. His first words: "I got hit by a punch I didn't see. I thought I was getting him in the last couple of rounds, but I got hit by a strong punch. I never expected that punch." He was then taken by ambulance to University Medical Center for a precautionary brain scan. What the American cameras didn't linger on, what most of the Western boxing media glossed over in their analysis of the knockout, was what happened in the Philippines while Pacquiao was still in the hospital. An entire nation had watched their hero fall face first into a canvas and not get up. When Pacquiao appeared on the GMA network 2 days later, he broke down on camera. Not over the loss, not over the knockout, over what he saw it do to the people who loved him. His exact words: "The low morale, the sadness, I accept that. This is my job. But the reaction of the Filipinos, the many who cried, especially my family, it really hurts me." He wiped tears from his eyes as Jinky sat beside him, the same woman who had refused to go to the fight, and made a tearful public appeal for her husband to retire. His mother, Dionysia, went on television separately to say, "I have long asked you, son, it is time to retire because you started boxing at such a young age." And here is the detail that most people missed entirely. Freddie Roach, the man who had trained him for years, the man who knew Manny's physical and mental state better than almost anyone, said that same evening, "I was just talking to him before he went to the hospital. He's fine. He knows he walked into a punch, he made a mistake, and he got careless, and that happens in boxing. It's not the first time we've been knocked out, and it's not the first time we've come back from a loss." And then, quietly, he added this: "Emotionally, sucks, I hate to lose. We've been on a little bit of a bad run lately." That's the most honest thing Freddie Roach said all night. What happened to Manny Pacquiao in the months after that knockout was not a collapse. It was a reckoning. He had already started the process of rebuilding, not physically but personally, before the Marquez fight. He had converted to born-again Christianity in 2011. He stopped gambling, stopped drinking, began daily Bible study. But the knockout crystallized something. In interviews that followed, Pacquiao spoke about an emptiness he had felt even at the peak of his career, even while winning 15 straight fights. He told the LA Times that during the period before his conversion, he had considered suicide and would cry himself to sleep, despite being one of the most celebrated athletes on earth. He said, "I asked myself what I should do. Lord, am I not worthy?" The December 2012 knockout did not create that emptiness, but it forced him to face it publicly. It stripped away the armor, and it made the personal chaos and the marriage in crisis, the distractions, the weight of being a national symbol while privately coming undone, impossible to ignore any longer. When asked about the Marquez knockout in subsequent years, Pacquiao never blamed the punch, never blamed Marquez, never blamed his corner. What he said simply, Vesmal Kawai, was, I saw the replay and it just happened. That's boxing. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. That is a sentence that sounds like acceptance, but it took him years to genuinely mean it. Manny Pacquiao went back to training. He won his next fight. He won the one after that. He beat Adrian Broner and Keith Thurman, both considerably younger than him, at the age of 40. He was elected to the Philippine Senate. He ran for president. By any conventional measure, he recovered. But December 8th, 2012, was not simply a knockout in a boxing match. It was the night the world saw, in one frozen 2-second image, everything that can go wrong when a human being carries too much at once. A fractured marriage, a political career, the weight of a nation, a rival who had been studying him for nearly a decade, and a training camp that fell apart in its final week because a man refused to walk out of his hotel room without the woman he had nearly lost. That is the real story the cameras didn't show. Not because it was hidden, but because nobody was looking at any of it. The cameras were pointed at the ring, and the fight, the real fight, had been happening somewhere else entirely. Manny Pacquiao's words that night, before being taken to the hospital, ended with this. It was a good shot. I will take a rest and come back to fight. He did. He always does. But what the camera didn't show you, and what this story is really about, is what it costs a man to keep getting up. Not from a canvas, from everything else. If this changed how you see that night, drop a comment and share this with someone who thinks they already know the Pacquiao story. Because they don't. Not the whole thing.